Okay, so today's lesson is going to be a bit trickier than the first one because a lot of us probably don't know how overtime works. Now, obviously, again, we talked about all this in class. It's all blank right now because I'm doing this before class. But the kind of tricky thing about it is you have your formula sheet. However, you really need to understand how overtime works. The formula sheet can kind of help jog your memory, but it's not a super like, oh, use this formula. It's kind of a process. And you just really have to understand how it works. So we're going to ease into overtime. We're going to start simple because in this lesson, we're really mostly going to be talking about weekly pay. Yeah, because overtime is based on a weekly basis. Because again, full-time hours are 40 hours, and we talked about that. If you work anything over 40, by law, you have to get paid extra only for those extra hours. So this is why it's a little bit confusing. Again, this is a law so that you don't get taken advantage of and forced to work 100 hours in a week and not get any benefit out of it. Real quickly, I'm going to boot my dog because he sounds gross. As always here. Just a video. Go ahead and take it out. Go off. Okay. So let's go back and try this again. So Maureen works, talking this through at a local Chicken King restaurant, whatever that is. Her regular hourly wage, this is how much she makes per hour, is $9.70. If she regularly works 40 hours per week, which is full time, right? 40 hours, that's like a typical work week for full-time pay. What is her regular weekly pay? Well, she works this many hours per week, and this is how much she makes per hour. What do we think we have to do? Do we know? You should be multiplying. Per is a multiply type word. If I say per or each or every or don't forget of, that means to multiply. So this is how much she makes per hour. She works 40 hours in a week. You should be multiplying these two. So 40 times $9.70. This is how, if you want to make sure your paycheck is correct, this is what you should do. You should see, okay, how many hours did I work? Multiply that by my hourly rate. And then you can look at your paycheck and see if they did it correctly. Sometimes, again, they may actually do it wrong. Even though it's a computer that handles most of it, I will tell you, when I was a server, I did get a paycheck done incorrectly. And they wouldn't have known unless I checked it and brought it to them and were like, hey, something went wrong here in the system. And they fixed it. It wasn't a big deal. So go ahead and try this one. Hint, hint. A lot of times this is going to be very similar. So go ahead and try it. Okay, so Mary works at Burger King. Her regular hourly wage is $10.30. Once again, this means $10.30 per hour. She works 30 hours per week. So now she's not working full-time. This would be considered part-time. If she regularly works 30 hours per week, what is her regular weekly pay? So once again, you should have just multiplied. $10.30 for each hour she works, and she works 30. Each, per, of, every, those are all multiply type words. So she should make each week $309. And again, that's before taxes get taken out. What you actually take home is going to be less than that. So did we go over gross pay in this one? Yes. So this is, again, the gross pay. It's it's disgusting because you see it on your paycheck, and then they show you all the taxes coming out, and then they say, okay, here's what you actually get to take home, your net pay. And it's always, obviously, a lot less than the gross pay. So let's go ahead and talk through now overtime. So let's say Maureen from example 1, which is this Maureen right here, normally makes $9.70. That's her normal hourly rate. If she works overtime at her job, she receives an hourly rate of 1 1/2 times her regular hourly rate. Once again, this is what we call time and a half. 1 1/2 refers to time and a half. So it says, what is Maureen's hourly overtime rate? So what this means is, how much does she make on just those hours that she works extra beyond 40? Again, For up to 40 hours, she's getting paid $9.70. So I'm going to go ahead and say her regular rate, this was again $9.70 from number 1. So on overtime hours, she gets paid 1.5 times her regular hourly rate. What do you think we should do? Multiply by 1.5. I'm going to go ahead and say 1.5, right? Same thing. So on overtime hours, this is what she gets paid. So $9.70 times 1.5. So only on those extra hours, and this is what we have to understand, and we'll talk through in a bit. Only on any hours over 40, now she's making $14.55 per hour. So this is why you might like overtime. Like, sweet, give me all the hours, because on those extra, suddenly you're making a lot more money. I have my sister-in-law is a nurse, and nurses get paid by the hour. She gets paid normally like $30 per hour because she's a nurse. On overtime hours, her time and a half rate is 45. That's 30 times 1.5. And that's a lot of money. I do not make that much as a teacher, obviously, but that's okay. So overtime sucks because you're having to work a lot, but you are going to make more money. Let's put this together now with talking about, okay, if you do work overtime, how much will you get paid total? So let's read through this. Janice earns $10 per hour. Now again, this is a normal pay, meaning on any hours up to 40, she gets $10 per hour. But she gets time and a half for any hours worked beyond 40. So we want to find her total pay for a week in which she works 45 hours. So here's what we do for these questions. And this is going to look very familiar because we did something like this in our pre-unit. These 45 hours are not all created equal. Sorry, they are not. Because only 40 of them are regular. See where I'm going with this? How many would be considered overtime hours? How many hours are left? 5. So I hope that makes sense. 40 plus 5 gets us 45. That's what this breakdown does. Is what are these two numbers that add to give us our total? Really what I'm doing is I'm subtracting these two. Yeah. So these hours get paid differently. So what we have to do here is we're going to split the hours up into regular normal hours and overtime hours and calculate the pays separately. And then we're going to add the pays back together at the end. So these 40 hours are normal. How much does she normally get paid per hour? $10. So all we have to do is multiply by 10. $10 per hour. This is 40 hours. So multiply. So hopefully we can do this without putting it in the calculator, but this is 400. So we just set that aside for now. Now let's look at the 5. Now, here's how I want you to think through this because people forget what numbers we need to be using. And if you think in this order, you might not forget. So first off, we want to say, well, if these 5 hours were normal, we would get $10 per hour, right? $10 per hour. Sorry. Normally. But they are not regular hours. They are overtime. What that means is she gets time and a half. And once more, what number is associated with time and a half? 1.5. Once again, 1.5 time and a half. So she gets 1.5 times as much as she normally would. This would be normal, but she gets 1.5 times as much just for those hours, not for all of the hours. It's not that you work 41 hours and then suddenly, whoa, you're getting time and a half for everything. No. The first 40 hours, still just paid regular. Only the extra get paid that 1.5 times as much. So 5 times 10 times 1.5, we should get 75. Again, keep in mind that normally these 5 hours should be getting $50, right? 5 times 10. Because of this overtime, because of time and a half, she gets 1.5 times as much. So our last step, we're going to add these together, 400 plus 75. And this is going to be her total pay. Now again, this is the gross pay. because taxes still have to come out of this. But you're still going to be making more money than usual, even if taxes are coming out. So this process works this way every single time for overtime for time and a half. We have to take our total number of hours, split them up into 40 always, because 40 is regular full-time. How many extra, and then calculate them separately, add them back together. So let's try it again. Okay, so I'm going to kind of get you set up here, and then you're going to try this one on your own. So Ron regularly works 40 hours per week at a rate of $15 per hour. Now again, this is his normal rate for up to 40 hours, but he worked 50 hours. I don't like the way this is phrased. I should rephrase this, at time and a half. 50 hours meaning 50 hours total. So I'm just going to say 50 hours total. That doesn't sound very good. So what I want you to think through first, you can try the whole problem if you think you know, but I'm going to chunk this up. 50 hours is going to get split into how many is full-time, regular hours, and then what's the overtime hours. Go ahead and try and split this up, and then we'll check. So 40 always comes first because that's normal full-time hours. That means he worked an extra 10. 40 plus 10 gives us 50. So go ahead and try this. Remember, it's going to be done the exact same way as the last problem, just using this hourly rate. These 10 hours get paid 1.5 times as much, so don't forget that. Okay, let's see where you got to. So these are normal hours. Normally, $15 per hour. So we're going to go there. 40 times 15, I'll do it real quick. These get paid just like normal. These hours are nothing special. Up to 40, you get paid normally. For the 10, here's the thought process. You want to think, okay, if they were regular normal hours, it would just be 15. But these are not regular normal hours. These are overtime. So we should also multiply by the number for time and a half, which is 1.5. So 10 times 15 times 1.5 gets us to be 225. And then again, we add these numbers back together at the end. You should have gotten 825 as your total. So again, you want to go through that thought process. See how I only multiplied two numbers here for the regular pay, and then I multiplied 3. That will always happen. 2 numbers here, 3 numbers here. We split it up, we calculate, we add them back together. So I want you to go to your journal. I got it pulled up here. 1.1b time and a half. So if you never picked up your journal, you hopefully are keeping, because you already should have written stuff for the prereq unit, keeping some pages for this, or you can kind of keep it going in your notes, it's fine, on your own piece of paper if you do not have the journal. I want you to take a moment and explain how time and a half works or how it's calculated. If you want to use one of our examples, you can, but I want you to say it in your words. If I worked this many hours in a week and I got paid overtime, explain how it's calculated or how that works. Okay, so again, things you could have said. You could have said you get paid your normal rate for up to 40 hours. For anything over 40, just those hours get paid extra, 1.5 times as much extra. So something like that. Again, you could have used one of our examples. Let me know if you want this journal to be something that you can look back on and everything is good. If you want to take a picture of it and send it to me and say, hey, is this a good explanation? Because this journal is really just for you. Then I can let you know if you want to rephrase it a certain way or if it's good.